Cyno is the most exciting character we've gotten in a while in Genshin Impact. His gameplay is super fast-paced and exhilarating, and he's got a ton of different artifact and weapon options. This makes him quite enticing for players who might not pull for signature weapons, since it is reassuring to know that there are a lot of alternatives. Unfortunately, with this in mind and the caveats from his kit, his build does get a little bit complicated. If you have no idea what to do with Cyno after pulling him, or you already have a build and just want to confirm that you've got the best options farmed for him, then you've come to the right place. Like any of my other character guides, this video will cover Cyno's best artifacts and weapons to general playstyle and team compositions. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Cyno is complicated. And when I say this, he really is complicated since not many characters are actually that complicated in Genshin. At least for starters, his basic abilities are somewhat easy to grasp because I like to think of him as a cool combination of Razor and Xiao in terms of mechanics. His ability is just a quick dash attack and his burst gives him Electro Infusion for 10 seconds. What makes Cyno so good is that under the effects of his burst, his elemental skill gets a huge power up. Under Cyno's burst, his skill deals more damage. Using his skill extends Cyno's burst duration by 4 seconds, and the skill's cooldown becomes 3 seconds. This is the basis of Cyno's gameplay, and now you can probably see why I described him as exciting and fast-paced. His burst will replace the scalings of his normal attack talent for entirely new scalings, so your talent priority is his burst first, then his elemental skill. The actual normal attack talent is not needed, surprisingly enough, because that's not what it draws from under the effects of his burst. What's really confusing about Cyno are his 2 Ascension talents, so let's take some time to cover those. For starters, let's cover his first Ascension talent, Featherfall Judgment, and the Endseer stance. The tooltips will throw a bunch of ability names like the ones I just mentioned, and I know some of you have no idea what it's referring to. Basically, what the first Ascension talent tries to say is that there will be an eye marker on the screen around every 4.5 seconds. If Cyno uses his elemental skill during the window of time that the eye marker is on the screen, then his skill will deal even more extra damage and also fire off additional bolts of lightning that deal separate instances of electro damage and scale off 100% of his attack. Getting this skill timing down is crucial to Cyno's gameplay because there's so many different factors that affect Cyno's optimal combo with each source of external attack speed or constellation that you have. As much as I like relaying theory crafting into simple and understandable sections in my videos, that's simply not possible here with how many different combos you can have. I'll at least say that if you're a C0 Cyno with no attack speed buffs, this rotation on screen is very simple to remember, although you may need a handy Zhongli shield since it's really hard to not incorporate dodges. But that's enough rambling. Let's talk about his second Ascension talent, which increases Cyno's Electro Infusion damage by 150% of his Elemental Mastery, and also increases the damage dealt by the extra Electro Bolts from his Endseer state. This right here is what makes Cyno's build option so complicated. With certain weapons, EM may perform better, while with other weapons, attack may perform better. With the artifact section, I'll give some general advice on when to use which stat, but again, each player has so many different external buffs and artifact substat distributions that it's best to calculate damage output yourself if you really care about damage maximization. For those who don't care about damage maximization, hopefully my general suggestions can guide you to victory when it comes to building Cyno. If you want to play around with the numbers, I've linked the most effective and user-friendly Genshin damage calculator in the description below, since I know not everyone is adept at using spreadsheets. And with that out of the way, it's now time to get into the bulk of the video with artifacts and weapons. We're going to start with Cyno's artifacts because artifacts are by far the biggest head scratcher when it comes to building Cyno. Coming with the good news first, artifact sets for Cyno are a breath of fresh air because he has multiple competitive options, and for the most part, they are player preference since no set has an overwhelming damage advantage. The 3 artifact sets you can choose from for Cyno are the 4-set Gladiator, 4-set Gilded Dreams, and 4-set Thundering Fury. Starting off with the 4-set Gladiator, this was one of the biggest surprises to me when testing different Cyno options. It's not the best in slot, and mathematically the damage ceiling may not be as high as a set like the 4-set Gilded Dreams, but the consistent damage it provides to Cyno's Electro Infusion is extremely valuable with this set. Not to mention, the artifact set is also very welcoming to new players since you get a lot of 4-star gladiator pieces early on. Next, we have the 4-set Gilded Dreams. This set can never have 100% uptime due to the fact that you can only refresh the 4-set buff after the previous buff has expired, but regardless, with EM scaling and a short elemental skill cooldown, this is the perfect set for reaching the damage ceiling with Cyno. And last but not least, we have the 4-set Thundering Fury. This is my personal favorite set on Cyno, and if you don't know what you're doing on Cyno, definitely build this artifact set. The reason I say this is because the 4-set effect of skill cooldown reduction just makes Cyno's gameplay a little more forgiving by effectively turning his skill into a 2-second cooldown. Not only does casting your skill more often make Cyno's energy requirements lower than normal, but it also makes it so that it's easier to time his skill with the eye marker from the Endseer stance when you're just mashing buttons and not paying attention to combos. Obviously, it won't be perfect, and that's what theory crafting is for, but a lot of the times I just need to unwind, blast some music, and play with my brain off, which is why I like this set the best, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of you guys are like this as well. The theory crafting implications are yet to come with the 4-set Thundering Fury, as more testing needs to be done, but from a pure casual perspective, Thundering Fury is fantastic. In the end, whether you like consistency, damage ceiling, or ease of gameplay, you can choose either the Gladiator, Gilded Dreams, or Thundering Fury respectively. As for artifact stats, Cyno wants EM or attack in the sands, electro damage bonus in the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the circlet. Electro damage and crit rate or crit damage are non-negotiable, but the elephant in the room is EM versus attack in the sand slot, and the general advice I can give without guiding you to a spreadsheet or a damage calculator is pretty straightforward and intuitive. Bullet number 1, always use EM with Cyno's signature weapon, Staff of Scarlet Sands. Part of your EM stat pool is converted to attack with the passive from his signature weapon, so there's no reason to have this bonus go to waste. Bullet number 2, always use EM with low base attack weapons, specifically Deathmatch and White Tassel. Even though you'll notice you won't have a lot of attack due to the weapon's low base attack, using attack as a main stat does hurt the stat efficiency. There are many supports that can give flat buffs to attacks or huge boosts to attack percentage, so don't be afraid of using EM with these weapons. And bullet number 3, any other weapon that I did not mention can use either attack percent or elemental mastery in the sands. You should be picking the pieces that have the best substat rolls because that's what really matters with Cyno. There are always ways to buff EM and attack if you lack one or the other, but never ways to buff your crit stats. So if you're not actively min-maxing and using thousands of resin to chase that one perfect sands piece, don't overthink it. Trust your gut, and if you're not sure, you could always plug in your artifacts into the calculator that I've linked in the description below. Before we move into weapons, your artifact substat focus should be crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, attack percent, then EM. Even though Cyno has a ridiculously low skill cooldown and can generate particles while under the effects of his burst, you still need to pay attention to his energy. Under normal circumstances where you have another Electro character for the Electro Resonance, 130 to 140% energy recharge is a good benchmark to aim for. With Katane Cross Spear and Thundering Fury, that number can go as low as 110%, since Katane generates flat energy for the user, and Thundering Fury lets you cast your skill more for extra energy particles. You might have already noticed that I've thrown out some weapon names in the artifact section, but now it's time for you to find out what the best weapons are to use on Cyno. Cyno's got a handful of options that perform well, so even if you don't have his signature weapon, you're in good hands. Technically, the number 1, 2, and 3 spots for Cyno's best weapons are obviously going to be Staff of Scarlet Sands, Primordial Jade Wing Spear, and Staff of Homa. However, I'm willing to bet that the majority of you are not here to see that because you probably already know how broken these polearms are. The question actually is, what other non-5-star polearms can I use on Cyno? Well, for 3-star and 4-star polearms, the number 1 and 2 spots go to the Deathmatch and White Tassel. Both of these weapons are huge stat sticks to crit rate, and their passives always buff Cyno when he's on the field. Following close behind, we have the Katane Cross Spear and Missive Wind Spear. The damage ceilings of these weapons are pretty good considering they're both completely free-to-play options, but of course, they are not the top-ranked options because they simply lack the crit rate that Deathmatch or White Tassel have. With Katane Cross Spear, you cannot use your skill before your burst with the passive, but other than that, the passive is phenomenal for flat energy generation. Missive Wind Spear is consistent like the crit options and also functions really well within EM sands given how much attack you can get from the weapon's base stat and passive. And last but not least, the other two options that can function on Cyno are the Sumeru craftable Moon Piercer and the Mondstadt craftable Prototype Star Glitter. Again, the operative word here is functional. Yes, they work on Cyno, but you have a clear better craftable option with Katane Cross Spear, so try throwing refinements into Katane before these two weapons. Cyno's teammates are just like any other Electro character. Lots of Dendro, lots of Electro, lots of Anemo, and Zhongli because he's just that guy. All jokes aside, Aggravate is going to be the premier composition for Cyno because he's a hyper carry and Aggravate supports that type of playstyle extremely well. For Cyno's Aggravate team, you'll have Cyno, Shinobu or Dori, Dendro MC, and Sucrose or Kazuha. Shinobu is the go-to Electro healer, but now we also have Dori as a substitute, so take your pick. As much as I love Dori's annoying idle dialogue in Japanese, for gameplay, I like Shinobu just a tiny bit better. Whichever one you choose is completely up to you, but the main premise here is that these two are purely here to provide survivability to the team. Dendro MC is definitely favorable over Kale for a Dendro support, simply because of their burst durations. Kale is more suited towards teams with short rotations or a quick swap playstyle, while Dendro MC has a longer burst cooldown but also a longer burst uptime, which makes him a better fit for Cyno, who spends up to 18 seconds on the field per rotation. Lastly, Kazuha and Sucrose are both fine in the Anemo slot since Sucrose's Elemental Mastery buff does benefit Cyno's raw damage scalings. If you're really not feeling the vibe of Dori or Shinobu and instead want to use an offensive Electro character like Fischl or Beidou, one suggestion I can make is to substitute Kazuha or Sucrose out for Barbara with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer's Catalyst. It actually performs quite well and solves your problem of not having heals with an Electro healer, so don't sleep on it. The other alternative is of course to use Zhongli in this slot because we all know how busted his shield is. The next team for Cyno is a classic Taser team. Electrocharged has been extremely popular throughout the patches of Inazuma, and it continues to be a strong team as we start the next stretch of patches with Sumeru. The team setup is the exact same as the Aggravate team except we substitute Hydro in for Dendro. This will give us Cyno, an Electro support, a Hydro support, and either Sucrose or Kazuha again. This time, Sucrose and Kazuha are a must-have for swirling Electrocharged around, while the Electro support doesn't have to be a healer anymore. You can use Fischl, Beidou, Raiden Shogun, Yae Miko, or Electro MC, or even stick to the healers of Dori or Shinobu. The reason an Electro healer is not necessarily is because the Hydro slot is generally going to be Xingqiu or Kokomi, both of which have healing capabilities. Yelan is also a really popular option for Electrocharged teams, but that does leave us without a healer, so do consider using Shinobu or Dori in that case. These three units are strictly the best options for Taser teams because they have the most consistent and highest uptimes on Hydro application. You can also slot in our very new 4-star character Candice alongside Kokomi or Xingqiu to give us a double Hydro setup instead of a double Electro setup. Thanks to Candice's Ascension talent, she will buff Cyno's elemental normal attacks, but in exchange you'll have to make sure that you're not sitting anywhere near 100% base energy recharge since we do lose out on the Electro Resonance. Although it may not be the optimal setup for a Cyno team, this is definitely another fun Taser variation to try, especially for my people who pulled a ton of Candice copies on Cyno's banner. Those are the two main teams for Cyno, but other fun teams you can possibly use are Mono Electro or even Cyno plus the classic national team setup, which would include Xiangling, Bennett, and Xingqiu. I could go on and explain a few more cool teams to try out, but this video has already run its course. I don't want to keep you guys here forever, so if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch or sub to the YouTube channel, whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.